Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and the bell icon so you'll get notified of each new video as they come out.
Hey everybody, I'm JJ Johnson. You're watching Reality Survival. And so today we are going to talk about the 3 stages of starvation. And the reason I'm covering this, it wasn't something I actually had planned to talk about, but I just did a video that talked about can you defend your home if SHTF. And in the comments section, started talking with a lot of different people about, how starvation works and kind of how that affects people and those kinds of things. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to do a video on this. I think that video will be linked at the end of this one, so you can check that out as well. I also, to get a better understanding of kind of what my thought processes are when it comes to what it'll be like after a collapse, there's a couple of videos you should also watch in coordination with these two here. And that is looters will die first if SHTF, and I'll try to put that in the link down in the description as well. And then also the top 10 sheepdogs that will form after a collapse, or sheepdog gangs that will form after a collapse. And I'll try to link that one down below as well. That'll kind of help give you a better full-rounded picture if you watch all these videos together. But just to get going here, I've got some notes that I made on it because I was doing some research on it. I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of starvation and how it affects people, just because I've spent time in a deployed environment. I've spoken to a lot of people. Part of my job in doing counterintelligence overseas is that I go out into the neighborhoods, into the towns, the villages, and and the different compounds and all that kind of stuff, and I talk to people to try to identify where threats are coming from and all that kind of stuff. So I have a chance on 5 different deployments. I've had multiple chances, hundreds of opportunities to sit and speak with people who are in the middle of grid down situations, and the people who didn't have regular access to sanitation facilities, to electricity and all those kinds of things. So so I've been fortunate in that way, and that I've had some experience in talking with these people. But I wanted to go ahead and do some research as well so that we could talk about the physiological side of starvation as well, because human beings' physiology, it drives a lot about their behavior and all that kinds of stuff. So I think that unfortunately Hollywood movies, apocalyptic novels, and maybe even overactive imaginations tend to drive a lot about what we feel an apocalypse will be like, or what we feel a grid down situation would be like. But the reality is that we do have a lot of examples, real world examples of what these situations look like. And some people will say, well, it's going to be different here in America because we haven't gone without and all that kind of stuff. But look at Venezuela right now. Venezuela is a country that had plenty of resources, plenty of food, and all those kinds of things, and now it's currently in the middle of a collapse, and most people aren't doing much about it. They're pretty much accepting their fate, and a lot of that has to do with the physiology of starvation. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that here. Here in America, the biggest problem that people are going to have to deal with in a grid down situation is food and water. And this discussion is primarily going to deal with the food and the starving aspect of it, but it's important to understand that dehydration will also be accompanying all the aspects that we talk about here. And dehydration could actually be a bigger killer than starvation, depending on your geography, where you're at in the country, your access to groundwater, are you in a desert, those kinds of things. So it's also going to be a big factor and a compounding factor for that matter. And you'll see once we start looking at some of the signs and symptoms of starvation why dehydration can make things even worse. Okay, so in the United States we use and I've done a video on this as well, talking about the just-in-time food delivery system. So most grocery stores only carry about 3 days or so worth of food on their shelves. And coincidentally, most households also only have about 3 to 7 days worth of food in their pantries. So, if the grid were to shut down, there would very likely be a pretty immediate run on grocery stores, restaurants, convenience stores, gas stations, all the places that people normally buy food. Those places are going to get, cleaned out pretty quick. Because basically people are going to try to stock up on stuff as much as they can in a short period of time. When those food stores are found to be empty, then they're going to start looking elsewhere for food. They're going to go to grocery store distribution centers, school cafeterias, railroad cars, diesel trucks, you name it. Any other places that you can think of that there might be food stored, people are going to start raiding those and scavenging in those and all that kind of stuff. But after, a week or so, something along those lines, the food is going to start to dry up. And there's not going to be as many places that are going to be found, with food in them. And so at that point, then, once they eat through their food, maybe we're a couple of weeks or so into the ordeal now where we've really run through all that food, people are going to start to experience stages of starvation. And this is a key thing to understand, because your body acts in predictable ways, and it's going to limit what you can do, because you just don't have the energy that you need to do the things that you want. So the first phase of starvation is, before I get into this, if you guys are in a hurry, this is going to take a little while, so you may want to go ahead and go down to the little gear icon and put it to fast forward ×2, or put it on ×2 or something. And if you only have a 3-minute attention span, just don't even watch the video, because it's not for you. Okay, so the first phase of starvation is going to be the depletion of glycogen. And this is going to happen somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 hours to roughly 48 hours. And I kind of call this the hangry phase. You're hungry and angry, you might be getting some headaches and stuff like that, and your body's just telling you that you're hungry and all. So let's talk a little bit about the physiology of this. During the first stage of starvation, blood glucose levels are maintained through the production of glucose from proteins, glycogen, and fats. At first, glycogen is broken down into glucose. Only enough glycogen, however, is stored in the person's liver to last 6 to 48 hours. After that period of time, blood glucose levels are maintained by the breakdown of fats and proteins. So it's burning your carbs first, then it's going to go to your fats and proteins. During this initial phase, you may get some minor hunger pains, minor headaches, but again, this is just your body letting you know it's time to eat. You can pretty well function at your full capacity during this initial stage. The second phase of starvation begins at around 24 to 72 hours without any food, and that's when your body goes into ketosis. Now, some of you guys may have heard about ketosis if you do the keto diet and that kind of thing. This is essentially when this second phase might last for a couple of weeks or more, depending on your body composition, and how much body fat you have, because fats are the main energy source that are used during this stage of starvation. A person's liver metabolizes fatty acids into ketone bodies. They can then be used as a source of energy for your body. After approximately a week or so of starving, a person's brain starts to use the ketones bodies as well as glucose for stores of energy. Proteins that are not essential for survival are used first. So during this phase, you may initially deal with flu-like symptoms, and it's commonly called the keto flu. This is probably only going to last a few days, and once you're in full ketosis, you might feel less hungry and have a feeling as though you have more energy available. You may also not be as irritable and tired from the initial lack of glucose. You'll probably begin to get back some mental clarity and feel like you have enough energy, or have more energy as well, and focus too. But because of the lack of glucose in your body, you're not likely going to have enough energy for really highly aerobic or strenuous activities. And that is why some people who do the keto diet have to do a little bit of consumption of carbs, quick burn carbs right before they do workouts, because your body just doesn't have the juice to run really well on just these ketone bodies alone. All right. But the thing is that when you're in ketosis, you'll be able to walk around, you'll be able to talk, you'll be able to think more clearly, you can accomplish the basic survival functions. You'll be able to do scavenging for food and different things like that. But you're not going to be doing, high energy kind of stuff. Okay. Let's see. And again, the length of time that you spend in this second phase primarily depends on your body composition, i.e. how much fat you have to burn. Now, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that you should be fat. Okay, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to talk about the physiological stages of starvation and how your body reacts to it and how that affects what you can do in a grid down situation. Okay, so the third phase of starvation is autophagy, and this is essentially when your body starts to consume itself. This can occur as soon as 72 hours, but most likely will occur within 14 days of not having any food. Okay, so it depends on, again, your body composition and various genetic factors, but the third phase starts when the person's fat reserves are depleted and there is a switch to start burning proteins. And the major source of proteins in your body are your muscles. Muscles are the largest source of protein in the body and are quickly depleted. At the end of the phase, proteins essential for cellular functions are broken down and cellular function starts to degenerate. Along with weight loss, symptoms of starvation may include the following. These are really important to listen to because this affects how motivated and how willing people will be able to do things after the grid down, after it happens, okay? Tiredness, withdrawal, faintness, apathy, dizziness, weakness, dehydration, like we talked about, severe headaches, listlessness, depression, hallucinations, blood pressure drop, slowing heart rate, hypotension, thyroid malfunction, abdominal pain, body temperature fluctuation, increased susceptibility to disease, that's a big one, shrinkage of vital organs such as heart, lungs, ovaries, testes, and gradual loss of their functions, chronic diarrhea, anemia, reduction in muscle mass and consequent weakness, lower body temperature and extreme sensitivity to cold, think hypothermia, decreased ability to digest food because of lack of digestive acid production, irritability, and difficulty with mental concentration, immune deficiency, swelling from fluid under the skin, decreased sex drive, which I don't think people are going to be too crazed on the sex drive thing with the way people are probably going to smell if the grid goes down, but anyway, organ failure and heart attack. Now, so you go through that whole list of things, man, and that's a big deal because that's very telling on how people are going to behave when they're in starvation, when they get to the phase where there's starvation. There's not going to be a lot of energy for roaming around the countryside and attacking hard target compounds and stuff like that. And this is, I'm making a reference to the video that I did, Can You Defend Your Home? Because if you make your home a hard target, it's going to appear to be difficult to get into, and the vast majority of people will not have the energy for that or the wherewithal to do that. It's just not going to happen. I mean, there could be rare exceptions, okay, but for most people, probably not. So once the fats are broken down, your body starts breaking down into proteins, essentially wasting away your muscles. At this point, your brain's requirement for glucose has dropped from 120 grams per day to 30 grams per day. Read significantly reduced brain function. That's the interpretation there, right? Your brain will be able to survive from protein, but your muscles will slowly disappear. So interestingly, The greatest amount of protein loss occurs during the first 72 hours in autophagy. I hope I'm saying that right. Afterward, the body starts to adapt to conserve protein. Essentially, your metabolism slows down so much to the point that your body uses the smallest amount of energy possible. So, your body is basically demanding from you that you use less. You go into survival mode, and if you've ever spent time with, starving people, there's a look that this has, and it's just, the sunken in eyes and the dried skin and the very listless, just kind of withdrawn and not engaged kind of a look. So, your body may be able to survive for 3 weeks or even up to 70 days. Some reports, put people surviving up to 70 days. But again, this is going to depend on how hydrated you are and if you have plenty of fat reserves to use up the energy. However, at a certain point, regardless of your fat reserves and your hydration level, your immune system is going to be weakened due to a lack of vitamins and minerals. And this is really key, and this is important to understand. Few people are going to die directly from starvation because they usually die of infectious disease first. Starvation wreaks havoc on a person's immune system, largely on account of extreme deficiency of minerals and vitamins, like I just said. Many people will become weak and perish of immune-related diseases during starvation. Eventually, the person's body runs out of options. Fats, glucose, muscle mass, and tissue are finite resources that will eventually be spent, and the person will end up dying. If a person does die from starvation, its most immediate cause is usually by cardiac arrhythmia or cardiac heart attack, or by a heart attack brought on by either extreme tissue degradation, brought about by autophagy, or severe electrolyte imbalances. People can die of starvation in as little as 3 weeks or as long as 70 days, like I said. Malnutrition and infection can form a very vicious cycle that can be very hard to break. And this is a really interesting point here that it talks about. The immune suppression can become so bad that vulnerable people people with malnutrition basically become as vulnerable as people with full-blown uncontrolled AIDS. Because of the similarity between malnourished immune system and AIDS, it's sometimes called nutritionally acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. The acute risk of immune suppression is increased vulnerability to infection. Not only do malnourished people come in contact, or not only do malnourished people contract common diseases at a higher rate, they also contract the rare infections that are typically only found in severely immunocompromised people. So getting an infection is going to kill a lot more people, and getting sick is going to kill a lot more people than starvation itself, because our immune system just gets bad when we get really, really hungry and when we start experiencing starvation. So people are going to be sick. They're not just going to be starving, they're going to be sick as well. So for preppers, we need to think about, are people a threat in a grid down situation? Well, yes, they are, and but not like a lot of people think. The infectious disease is going to be a far bigger concern and probably the biggest contributor to the overall death count in a grid down type situation. The violence, the roving bands of highly energetic and super motivated criminal gangs, it's just not a real major concern. Now, should we be prepared to defend ourselves? Absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't. There definitely could be a few weeks to, maybe a month or maybe up to 2 months, of time frame when people have the energy to conduct kinetic type attacks and to, come out and try to take over your place or whatever the case may be. But the thing is that those when that happens in those periods of violence, those people are going to quickly learn that looting comes at a high cost, because they're going to see their friends and family members killed in very quick order. And I talk about this in the video, Looters Die First. In our country, we have such an armed population, that they're going to find out that, even an 80-year-old grandma with a double-barrel shotgun can deal death pretty quick, when she's determined to defend her last 4 cans of chicken noodle soup. So they're going to find out that looting is dangerous. That's something that's going to quickly become apparent even to the dumbest criminals. And so you want to make yourself look like a hard target, because if you make yourself look like a hard target, the psychology plus the physiology is going to be basically demanding that these people go to other places. They're not going to want to try to go against a hard target, especially when they have all these things going against them. All right, let's see here. So why do we need to know this information? Well, as preppers, this gives us some pretty good information for being able to predict what sort of things we should be prepared to deal with. First, we learned that we want to have plenty of food on hand so that we can be able to feed ourselves for the duration of the situation. Having a good supply of food on hand will provide you with a tremendous advantage over the vast majority of the population. Your mental capacity and your energy levels will be on point, and you will be physically and mentally ready to deal with whatever situations pop up. You're going to be at an advantage to everybody that you come in contact with, essentially. Second, we can learn that it will be important to defend our property, and that we may need to be able to do this for several weeks to a few months. So it's important to make sure that you have a group of people with you who are like-minded at your location. And the reason you want to have a group of people is, like I've talked about in many videos, is that you can't stay on guard duty for very long. Really, it's about 2 hours or so. And you really start to degrade your attention span, to the point that it almost becomes worthless. So you really need to be able to rotate your guard every couple of hours. And in order to do that for any extended period of time, you need a lot of people, because it becomes extraordinarily monotonous very quickly. But we can see that, as these people get sick and as they die off, as their energy level drops, the numbers of attacks are going to decrease and decrease and decrease. So we won't need to be able to hold this posture for that long. We will still need to be, on alert and all those kinds of things, but it's not going to be a never-ending situation. Things will begin to normalize, and that is something that you see and that I have seen in the deployments that I've been on, is that even in war zones, even in places where it is literally kill or be killed all the time, there begins to be a normal flow and rhythm to society, even in the midst of chaos. Okay, and so that initial burst will be the most dangerous part, and from there it will go downhill. Okay, yeah. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much just what I wanted to talk about. Like I said, we had some good conversations in the other video. Can you defend your property if SHTF? So go take a look at that video and look through the comments and all that kind of stuff. But this is mainly just trying to describe some of the points that I was talking with people about in the comments. Again, it takes a lot longer to explain, and there's a lot more involved in it. And I really cut it down, like just to the kind of the basic points of this, just to try to make it more consumable on YouTube type format or whatever. But there's a lot to it. But anyhow, guys, I'll be interested to hear your comments on this and see what you think. Do you think that the activity will sharply decline as the food sources decline as well? Or do you think that it's going to be a constant level thing that we have to continually look out for and always be on alert from here on ever after? I really don't think that's the case. I think it'll be kind of big at the beginning, and then there'll be a sharp drop off as disease and starvation and hypothermia and dehydration and all those kinds of things start to kick in, and people lose their motivation to come out and attack and stuff like that. So anyway, go ahead and check out those other videos too. Looters will die first if SHTF, and top 10 sheepdog gangs that form after the collapse, and I'll try to link those below as well. All right, guys, stay safe, and as always, I definitely appreciate it when you click the thumbs up button, when you share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And don't forget to live the 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe, guys.